doesn't necessarily mean they have internet in their homes or that they have a tablet or someplace a kiddo can get onto. And I don't think that, this is not, um, I think these are just things that we're learning. And a few years ago when I was looking at buying, we were looking at buying a new laptop or a laptop. My other one I'd had since college. One of our friends suggested, he worked at the Apple store and was like, I don't think you need laptops anymore. Like, just get a tablet. It's going to do everything that you need it to do. And just this mindset that's like totally different. Like, in some ways, if we're not working, like, we may not even need laptops anymore. And now all of a sudden, we're in this virtual school. Wait, maybe we do need the laptop. So just sort of, um, sometimes access is a barrier, but sometimes like technology has evolved so quickly that we don't use what we used to use. Again, not enough minutes, and just, recognizing that our relationship with technology has changed. So you once were face to face with kiddos every day, all day, and now you're face to face with a screen all day, every day. And maybe previously, you like to go home, watch an episode on Netflix or Prime or whatever, and now we're at home all day, or we're on our screens all day, and it's like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. And so just our relationship has evolved so quickly over the past 6 months, and it's just not what it used to be. And then just, challenges for ourselves, challenges for families. We have these pre-COVID, challenges and influences, but now we have some other layers. We have physical illness, death of loved ones, domestic violence rates are up, unemployment. All of a sudden, what might have already been a stressful situation has become an even more stressful situation. So some practical things for building connection and working with families and children, like just our simple environment that we work from. So I moved my desk to face the window so you get more light on my face. It feels more human that way. It's easier to see other people. Other people can see me. It feels slightly more realistic. It feels more welcoming. We want to think about where the lighting is, and lighting in the morning versus lighting in the evening. I know this seems really basic, yet I'm in so many meetings. I was in one this morning, and the whole outline of one of the people, she was black, totally dark, and I was like, come on now. So just being mindful of things like that and how close you are to the camera, how far away. I will say I see far less at the very beginning, like people who hadn't been used to Zoom. I would only see like noses up or like mouth down. So just being mindful of where you are in that camera angle, in that view. Volumes, tones, what you've got going on in the background, like totally get it. There are lots of things going on. And then, just sort of what's our nonverbal language as we're going on? How big is our screen? Where are our hands? Where are they not? What else can you see? What can you not see? Things like that. And also just recognizing like all of our boundaries are blurred now. So not just for us, but also for those we're working with. Our home environment is now our backdrop. If you're working from home, this was once our very personal space, which our families, we were working with had no access to for the most part, and now it's become very personal all of a sudden. And we've got other family members who come in the background. Maybe we've got dogs or things going on out the window. We have the same distractions and concerns as the families that we're working with. So just this piece of authenticity, and that, we're kind of all in this, figuring this out as we go. And if we can begin to normalize some of it, it becomes a little bit easier to build those connections. All right, just being aware again of our breathing, of our tone, how loud, how quiet we are, paying attention to our body language, monitoring our facial expressions. This I think we can go back and forth on. Sometimes I'm tired of seeing myself in the camera, and sometimes I just put it on a hide self view, because up until March I never had to look at myself as much as I have. So sometimes it's distracting, sometimes it's helpful, but it's just something to keep in mind. Allowing pauses for messages to be delivered. And you'll notice the words visit are in here. A lot of this information, I took some rapid response virtual home visiting, but if you just think of it like a check-in or office hours or teaching, or maybe those one-on-one appointments that you have with families, I think we need to, I'm finding the pacing of online meeting virtually sometimes needs to be a little bit slower because it takes longer for those signals to register back and forth. And when you're face to face, it can be easier to like see who's going to talk next, or you can read more. You've got, what do you say, more emotional information, but online it takes longer. So just giving space for conversations when you're meeting with families, when you're working with kiddos. So what does it mean to connect? This is good here. Not doing that again. I know I've kind of emphasized this a lot. Like, we can't be doing that for our families, or it's not going to be this really supportive, cohesive. We need to show up for ourselves. We need to show up first before we expect families to begin doing this. Just reflecting how have things changed for you and your family, what your level of stress is, your sleep, wellness, joy, relationships, and sort of thinking about one thing you can do each day. And I kind of talked a little bit about that, I think 2 weeks ago, like this baseline of gratitudes and then celebrating successes. And those are ways that we continue to build resilience. And really, I think a lot of this has to do with emotional competence. So when we've got a child who's out of control, we need to help. We're going to help support that parent, and then through that, what we're doing is we can't get there until we have that emotional competence. So we need to be competent in building trust and the ability to connect and repair disconnections through regulation, and then we can help the family regulate, and they can help their kiddo regulate. Again, in the classroom, it's different because we can regulate, and then we're going to help that kiddo regulate. But as we're working virtually, we've got this parent there, and all of a sudden the shift has been it's on the parent to some degree. And several of you were mentioning that, like what are the expectations that we want for the parents to hold for the kiddo as we're hosting classes online and as we're teaching online? And so what are we doing to become emotionally competent? How are we building trust with the parent? How are we regulating? How are we supporting that? And so now, in some ways, I think when we've been face-to-face, I don't think that we ever really bypassed the family, but it's different in the classroom, and we can work very directly, and we can use our skills and use these direct methods. And now we've got this parent there, and so what used to be this very direct connection with these children now comes to the parent first, and it's just this different shift than it is in the classroom. And it's sort of this dance, right? We're trying to teach, but we're also working with the parents too, and really a lot of that emotional competence. And so as we're thinking, am I teaching and I'm connecting? And I think it can be a both and recognizing, oh, we've got this parent there who maybe wasn't always in my circle time, or who wasn't turning the pages of a book, or who wasn't holding the piece of paper to cut with previously. And so it's this different dynamic that we're working with. And as you're meeting with, I would say some of these are going to be more directed, like if you were meeting one-on-one with a family or with a parent or even with a kiddo, you're doing observing, like, what's this like for you? What might be difficult? What have you tried? You're kind of doing some wondering, observation, prompting the parents. You can sort of see some of these interactions between the parent and the child, and you commenting, giving cues to parents, sort of thinking about some interaction. So reflecting to the parent what they've said, reflecting what the kiddo has said. And I recognize this is a shift from teaching to supporting the parent-child interaction to some degree. And I think there's enough information. I'll probably do a Wellness Wednesday on some of this, because I think as again, teaching face-to-face, you, the child, the children in the classroom, and now virtually we've got a parent. And I think, how can we empower that parent to increase the parent-child interactions? How can we support that? And I recognize, again, that's different than teaching, and I still think it's really important in building connections. Listening. So listening in a virtual world, we're listening for tone, for speed, we're pausing, pacing, like are they really high? Is there high energy? Is there low energy? Is there disconnect? Is there distraction? What are you hearing from the kiddo? What are they doing? Where are they at? I went in on one Zoom and one kid like totally fell asleep. Like the parent propped up, the phone, and then the kiddo just promptly fell asleep. So, and this was an afternoon one, like at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'm sure you've seen this, but just being aware of these things. What does it look like? What are you sort of getting from the vibe? Um, because as we're doing this, we're also kind of keeping in the back of our mind, like thinking about risks and needs for families. So, what are, thinking about substance use in the home, or maybe there's increased violence, thinking about, has a family member lost a job, what's the, level of sickness, maybe caregiver depression, and these are going to be risks. And then when we combine them with needs, is there need for food, formula, eviction, basic access to utilities or safer housing. When we combine these, this is where increased toxic stress can happen and increased chances of child abuse and neglect. And so it's sort of this multifaceted. We're trying to teach, building connection, and we're sort of trying to be aware of some risks and needs. And again, in the classroom, it's different because children often will play out those things or they'll make comments, but virtually it's going to look very different. And it's something to be aware of. And then interpreting observations in a virtual world. So, again, thinking about giving time to reflect, replay, that last, that meeting that you had, or maybe even that teaching, or, that Zoom time or that snack time, what did you hear? What did you make of it? Does this seem usual or unusual? How did the parent respond? What was the mood? Did it seem like it felt like a good connection, good interaction? What might be contributing to stress levels at home? And then how did you respond, or how would you like to have responded? And so this is, we're going to pause, after meetings or after we teach, and sort of reflect back on, not just what went well or what you could have done better, but how do you make meaning of what happened? What do you think was, what was the meaning of that? Where's that feeling coming from? I'm going to put on a different lens than a teaching lens. It's more of this reflective lens of what's going on for the family. What might this be like for the parent? What might this be like for the child in that circumstance? Again, it starts with us. So we can stay in relationship and regulate and nurture others if we practice self-care. And next week will be more about self-care and wellness, but we need to be doing that for ourselves before we can go in and interact with families, before we are sort of figuring this out, because I think we know very well, you know very well what to do face-to-face teaching, and now we're doing this virtually, and I think it's going to take even more awareness and reflection on our part to be moving into this space that is totally new. It is not impossible, but it is new, and it's going to take some time to sort of figure out what works, what doesn't work, what does the teaching look like, what works for the teaching, but also what does the connection with that family look like? How am I building that? Lisa talked about phone call, like using a phone call or checking in with a text. How are we showing up? And then making sure we are ready to show up. And that connection is not a form of manipulation to get what we want or need. So we are not connecting so that we can teach. We are connecting because we are humans, because relationships are the antidote to stress, because relationships build competency, relationships build development. And that is more than anything, that's what we need, are connections with other people. And as you're working virtually, it's that connection piece that's so important right now. So I'm just going to keep moving. In the future might want to try this out, or I heard someone else did this, I'm going to save that. Sometimes less is more. So it's maybe just, working on one app at a time, or one platform at a time, or just one teacher was doing, so that one teacher did snack, I think, the first week. Another teacher, they just did their morning meeting, and that's all that Zoom was, their morning meeting. They did that every single day. Like, sometimes less is more. We just need a little bit right now. If it's easier, hide your self view in your video so you don't have to look at yourself. Keep connecting with other people in your building, with other teacher friends, so you've got this validation. You can share ideas, celebrate successes, because as you can build that connection for yourself in other ways, you can help build that with your families. Again, competency is going to build over time. This is certainly new for everybody. It's going to take time to figure it out and to do it well. Development is development is development. So it's still happening over a screen. It's just going to be a little bit different to look for, and those nuances are going to be a little bit different. And to prioritize what you need to run your household and to remain healthy. So if that means working from home right now, then work from home. If that means going into school for a little bit, go into school. So what are you needing? So, if you fill your bucket first, then you can help buckets. And just thinking about, kind of touched on stress and toxic stress. So we think about some of these stressors right now, and you might be observing some of them over the screen. We can keep in mind that intensity of a stressor, duration, and then the frequency. It may not be a stress or a toxic stress for that kiddo, for that child. It might be maybe for another kid, but it all depends on a lot of number of factors. So frequency, intensity, and duration, the developmental level of the child. So the younger the kiddo is, and especially if there's stress between the child and the caregiver or the parent, that can have a really big impact on a kiddo who's maybe 18 months versus a kiddo who's 6, who has more developmental skills and knowledge and regulation. And the availability and capacity of adults in the caregiving environment. So are they as a buffer? Can they help the child understand the stressor and help the child cope with the stressor? So just because there's stress, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be toxic stress. And again, the buffer to stress is that a relationship with a caregiver. So when we have the absence of that adult protection and support, that's when it becomes more of that stress and that toxic stress. Because relationships, these are the source of building development and the source of building building resilience. So as we have, again, in the classroom, it was us and the children. That's where that relationship is built. And now it's a little bit different. We're really going to be focusing on a lot of that relationship between us and the adult, and then the adult and the child, and supporting some of that. And I know that's different than the classroom, but if we can name that, we can help begin to tame some of that as our role has kind of shifted a little bit. And then thinking, supporting children and supporting adults, supporting caregivers with children. And again, I think I'm going to do one on supporting or thinking about parent-child interactions, but thinking of, I don't know if you've heard of the love languages, how to build connections with children in love languages. Again, this is a little bit different virtually, but it's something we can share with parents who can build on that with their children. Words of affirmation, physical touch in a virtual environment is a little bit different, but you can do a high five over the screen or maybe a fist bump or something like that. Little gifts. So even a little, I know Lisa said, and actually I've talked to a number of people who are sending home things that parents can do with their children, or even writing a note to a child or a parent. That's still a way that could be a little gift. Quality time. Someone was saying yesterday they've done one-on-one screen time or one-on-one Zoom time with the students, and they've seen more success, and the kiddos have opened up that way. And little acts of service, how can we still do these things over a virtual environment? Can you do a chore together virtually, like clean up a table or wipe down a table or put a dish away or pick up the trash? So doing something together that's going to become this parallel. What can you sort of do in your space that parallels what children or families are doing in theirs? Then build your